I'd like to welcome everybody to Assembly Local Government. If we could, everyone find their seats, we'd like to get started. First, we'd like to go ahead and establish a quorum. So if the clerk would please call the roll.
Smythe.
Here.
Alejo. Bradford. Campos. Davis. Gordon. Hueso. Knight. Norby.
Very good. We would also like to go ahead and if someone would like to make a motion on the consent calendar to...
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. And the consent is item number 1, Assembly Bill 1515 by Ms. Torres. Please call the roll.
Smythe.
Aye.
Alejo. Bradford.
Aye.
Campos.
Aye.
Davis. Gordon.
Aye.
Hueso. Knight.
Aye.
Norby.
Very good. We'd like to, before we begin, briefly, I just want to make a quick comment that that today is the final committee hearing for our chief consultant, Katie. She is being moved into to the speaker's office. I guess she'll consider that a promotion, but leaving us here at local government. But we certainly is a kind of a bittersweet. It's great for her, but certainly is going to be a loss for us for the year in the committee. And we'll talk more about that later. But I just want to make sure while the majority of the committee was here, you knew that we're going to be going to suffer kind of a loss for us for the remainder of the year. But I want to also thank Katie for all of her work. So with that. We'd like to move item, we'll take up Ms. Torres. And we'll do that item number 5, AB 1600.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, for the opportunity to present this very exciting project and bill before you. The bill authorizes the Metro Gold Line Foothill Extension Construction Authority to expand the light rail service to the city of Montclair. This measure adds the city of Montclair as an extension city, and it allows the Metro Gold Line Authority to accept federal funds and authorizes the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority to operate a portion of the light rail project located in San Bernardino County. To date, the Metro Gold Line Authority has successfully completed the Los Angeles to Pasadena light rail, which includes 13 miles of rail. In 2010, in 2010, work began on Phase 2, an 11-mile segment which will connect Pasadena to Azusa. Assembly Bill 1600 lays the groundwork for Phase 3 of the project to bring 12 miles of light rail service from Azusa to Montclair. This is a very special project to me. It's a district bill. I have been working on this issue since my days back as a local council member and then elected mayor. I respectfully ask for your support.
Thank you very much. This bill does have support on both sides, witnesses in support.
Mr. Chair, members, Steve Baker with Aaron Reed & Associates representing the Metro Gold Line Foothill Extension Construction Authority, the sponsors of the measure. Just very briefly, we need statutory approval to move into San Bernardino County. We do plan to work with Metro to make sure that the cost allocation is appropriate between the two counties and ask for your aye vote.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, David Jones on behalf of the City of Pasadena in strong support of this measure.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, Andrew Antwi on behalf of LA Metro. The committee, the Executive Management and Audits Committee of LA Metro took a work with author position on this bill, but staff between the two agencies have already collaborated on some language that should address the concern. The basic concern is just clarifying that LA Metro would not be on the hook to pay for costs to build or operate in San Bernardino County. And so with that, I expect when we resolve that, we'll continue to support at that point.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, Brian Lungard on behalf of the San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors in support.
Very good. Any other witnesses in support? Opposition?
I move the bill.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Torres?
Respectfully ask for your support.
Very good. We have a motion and a second. Let's call the roll.
Motion is due pass to appropriations. Smythe.
Aye.
Smythe, aye. Alejo. Alejo, aye. Bradford. Bradford, aye. Campos. Campos, I. Davis. Gordon. Gordon, I. Hueso. Hueso, I. Knight. Knight, I. Norby. The bill is.
Very good. That measure is out.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now be taking up item number 3, AB 1585. By Speaker Perez will be presented by Ms. Atkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. And I'm pleased to be here on behalf of Speaker Perez today to present AB 1585, which retains redevelopment housing funds for affordable housing and makes the process of redevelopment agency dissolution and the winding up of their affairs more orderly, flexible, and responsible. AB 1585 is needed to address legitimate concerns about the implementation of AB 26X, the dissolution legislation. Our expectation and intent in enacting AB 26X last year was that few, if any, redevelopment agencies would be dissolved. Instead, they would continue under the voluntary program created by its companion measure, AB 27X. Unfortunately, litigation resulted in a California Supreme Court decision that overturned the voluntary program while upholding the dissolution law. Consequently, implementation of AB 26X is an urgent issue that affects hundreds of local governments. This bill transfers the balances in redevelopment low and moderate income housing funds to local housing agencies for affordable housing, and it clarifies that those housing entities shall have repayments of past RDA housing fund loans or deferrals. The bill discourages communities from simply sitting on affordable housing funds. Money must be obligated within 2 years and spent within 4 years, or any excess balance will be transferred to the Department of Housing and Community Development to increase affordable housing within that community's county, with priority to housing for lower income groups. However, to provide some flexibility to HCD, they may grant 2-year extensions. And also, communities within a county may agree to transfer funds amongst themselves to enable funding to go where projects are actually ready to be built. The bill prevents a disorderly fire sale of RDA assets by requiring inventories of RDA properties, adoption of a policy, and an orderly process for disposal that will preserve the property's values. The bill gives oversight boards more flexibility to respond to some of the most significant concerns of local governments. The boards may allow local governments to retain RDA assets that serve a governmental purpose, such as police stations or parks, and they may approve the repayment with an interest rate cap of legitimate loans that cities or counties made to their RDAs. The bill also responds to local concerns by clarifying that successor agencies are legally distinct from cities and counties acting in that separate capacity, and by allowing oversight boards to approve temporary increases in the administrative cost cap if necessary. The bill includes a number of additional technical and clarifying amendments, and finally, we are accepting the committee amendments for adoption as authors' amendments in Appropriations Committee. These amendments provide further clarification and consistency, as well as transparency and accountability.
Thank you. And those are on page 9 in your analysis, members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. You may please continue.
I would take your comments, questions, and ask for an aye vote.
Very good. We will, as the policy in the committee, again, for support and opposition, we take 3 leads and then the Me Too's, if you will. So if we could move to the speakers in support, please, witnesses in support.
Mr. Chair and members, Dan Carrig on behalf of the League of California Cities. First of all, we really appreciate the work of the Speaker and Assemblymember Atkins and other members in sort of compiling a very comprehensive bill that begins to identify and clean up a number of items that there's been a lot of confusion and concern about around the state. We think it's a very helpful bill. It helps improve the transition in terms of the dissolution of redevelopment agencies. Obviously, we're busy at work as well on figuring out where we go from here in terms of new tools for economic development. But it makes sense to have the dissolution occur in a rational and hopefully way that's more workable and eliminates controversy and confusion where possible. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, members, David Jones on behalf of the California Redevelopment Association. We'd also like to express our thanks to the Speaker, his staff, the task force, and others who worked to bring this product forward. This makes a number of very, very critical changes to the dissolution process. As we know, the AB 26-1X was not drafted and, has many deficiencies in our view from a number of standpoints. We appreciate the fact that this is going to stop the fire sale of assets. We think this is not in the best interest of the state or local communities, especially retaining the housing funding is very critical to all of our agencies to allow us to have some sort of gap financing to fund affordable housing as we move forward in this state. Additionally, the language on the loan, retaining the loans, this is very important. Much of this is general fund money for local governments. This is money that, as you are aware, two-thirds of the average local government spends money on public safety, so it's very critical for police and fire. And we would ask that you support the bill. And as noted, this bill is not the vehicle for all the problems that we see with redevelopment, and we understand that this is limited to a certain set of issues, and we look forward to working with the author and others on perhaps other vehicles to address some of the other issues, including bond proceeds and other problems that we have. We'd ask for an aye vote.
Julie Snyder with Housing California, representing the nonprofit development community. The housing provision that my friend David Jones referred to will allow roughly 140 developments representing more than 9,000 homes and 12,000 jobs to go forward. So we thank the Speaker and Ms. Adkins and the working group for including this provision and urge your aye vote.
Good afternoon, Brian Augusta on behalf of Western Center on Law and Poverty. Very important policy in this bill to help get some more of this money on the street, get these projects going, and house our low-income families throughout the state. So we'd urge your aye vote.
Jason Bryan on behalf of the California Building Industry Association in support.
Jonathan Clay on behalf of the City of Coronado in support.
Maureen Higgins representing the California Housing Consortium in support.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Lundgren on behalf of Habitat for Humanity California in support.
Mr. Chair, Anthony Gonsalves. I'm representing the cities of Rosemead, Torrance, Pomona, Rancho Cucamonga, Camarillo, Lakewood, Cerritos, and Palmdale. And we also want to thank the Speaker and Assemblymember Atkins and the working group for moving this bill forward. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members, Roxanne Miller, representing the Mayor, City Council, City of San Jose, would report to you today that our first oversight meeting will be this Thursday, all parties at the table. And as you can imagine, it's a task to unwind a second largest redevelopment agency in the state. We are all committed. We appreciate the opportunity to work with you and the leadership of the Speaker and staff, and we will continue to do so as issues arise. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair and members, Kurt Chaparra on behalf of the Mission Bay Development Group in San Francisco. We support the bill. We thank the Speaker and Ms. Atkins and the working group for all the work they've done, and obviously they've got some work ahead of them too. And we support the bill. There's some fine points that we're still working on. I'm sure that'll come as no surprise given the complexities of all this. But we think everything's moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Good afternoon. Scott Sadler representing St. Anton Partners, a low and moderate housing developer here in Sacramento, supporting the bill.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ori Korb. I'm an assistant county counsel for Santa Clara County. Santa Clara County has been a leader in both successfully defending ABX 126 before the California Supreme Court in the Monte Santos case, and also in the implementation of ABX 126. We probably know about as much about the implementation process as anybody does in the state. And we've learned that there are a number of issues associated with the implementation of ABX 126. However, this bill, AB 1585, does not address those problems in a manner that is fair and balanced, but rather skews the emphasis of the wind-down provisions in favor of the successor agencies and against the other taxing agencies. And that's the reason why we're opposed to the provision, to this bill. I do want to emphasize at the beginning that we do not oppose the affordable housing provisions as standalone provisions. We have in the past not opposed SB 654 Steinberg, which is essentially the same provision regarding affordable housing monies and assets being used for affordable housing purposes. However, we must oppose this bill not because of the affordable housing provisions, but all the other provisions in the bill that we think, again, skew the wind-down process unfairly towards and in favor of the successor agencies. The problems that we see in the bill are several-fold. First, we have a concern about the provision that would remove any deadlines for the essentially for the validation of the ROPS. We think that there are a lot of problems associated with the validation of the ROPS. There are a lot of agencies that are that have started late in the process. I'm glad to report that the County of Santa Clara is not one of them. We will, in fact, have our ROPS certified by the deadlines imposed by AB X126 as modified by the Mato Santos decision. But the answer for the problem that other agencies are having in meeting those deadlines is not to eliminate the deadlines, because that will just encourage gamesmanship on the part of certain successor agencies, but rather to hold them to the deadlines and to recognize the fact that the Department of Finance has, in a March 2nd communication to successor agencies across the state, indicated how they will deal with the problem of successor agencies not meeting their deadlines regarding the ROPS. I've been told that the problem with the Department of Finance's answer to the problem is that they are rewriting the law. We disagree wholeheartedly. In fact, the problem is not Department of Finance, it's successor agencies not complying with the law. And the Department of Finance, which already has significant discretion under AB X126, would in fact be exercising its discretion consistent with the problem that they face with the successor agencies not meeting the requirements of the law. The second problem that we have with AB 1585 is the expansion of the definition of enforceable obligations. We have, in fact, two problems. The first one is that it's not literally considered an enforceable obligation, but the bill would allow for the continuing payment of employee compensation and benefits, apparently out of new increment. We think, as we analyze the problem this week, that that this essentially amounts to an unconstitutional shift of new property tax revenues to away from the taxing agencies and to the successor agencies to pay these costs, and that should not be allowed. The second problem we have, of course, is that the expansion of enforceable obligations to include all loans from day one in any redevelopment agency until December 31, 2010 will include a lot of transactions that are highly problematic. We don't believe that the Oversight Board under this bill would have a sufficient amount of discretion to review and to deny those particular line items. We think it's going to be highly problematic. It's going to result in the shifting of a lot of money over to the successor agencies, and this is improper. We have, as I said, quite a bit of experience now in reviewing ROPS, and just by example, we've looked at the ROPS for one agency in Santa Clara County, which total approximately $472 million. Of those items, we've received documentation for only about 2/3 of those line items. We've reviewed approximately half of them, and we found justification for one of them. Another city in the county has indicated a total amount of ROPS equaling $349.9 million. We have received one document supporting all of those line items. Clearly, there is a problem with what this bill is doing regarding an expansion of the enforceable obligations. We understand that this is proposed primarily to deal with certain loans that are, in fact, justified and that should be paid. We recognize that there may be loans out there of that type, but rather than tailoring the language to deal with those specific situations, it is all-inclusive, which then creates a real problem for the oversight boards. So we must oppose that provision. We also have
wrap it up real quick, because we do have another witness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our other problems revolve around the membership of the oversight boards. The oversight boards are clearly intended to be checks on the successor agencies. Successor agencies clearly are attempting to capture control of the oversight boards. The change here would give them more control over membership of the oversight boards. That seems highly inappropriate. We also have a concern about the shift of certain property tax assets away from the taxing agencies. The bill would include both supplemental and unitary assessments in the calculation of revenues that go into the trust funds, but would not include roll corrections, which currently are calculated by the county and by other counties in their tax revenues that go into the redevelopment funds. So for all these reasons, we oppose the bill. I should also add that we were invited by Assembly Speaker Perez's office to provide comments to the bill. We appreciate the invitation. We have provided comments. I don't believe the comments are before the committee right now, but we do look forward to working with Assembly Speaker Perez's office and hope that we can take care of some of the problems with the bill. But as it's currently constituted, we must oppose the bill.
Very good. Thank you. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, Alan Fernandez on behalf of Los Angeles County, also with an opposed unless amended position. I want to be first complimentary of Speaker staff and the working group staff. They have heard us out. We've been in discussions with them since the bill is introduced. We're actually at a point of opposed unless amended at this point because we actually believe the bill is going in the wrong direction. And at the outset, let me be clear. We are strongly supportive of the affordable housing provisions. Indeed, we have a support position on SB 654. And so were 1585 amended to just contain those affordable housing provisions, we would be supportive. And we believe those provisions are the ones that merit the urgency. With regard to the other provisions, many of the concerns raised by County Council from Santa Clara we would probably agree with, and we're in the process of delineating those concerns, and we will be sharing and working with the working group going forward. But if I could just put a finer point on one of the items he discussed, and that is the expansion in this bill of the term enforceable obligation. The ROPS, as he talked about, which is our recognized obligation payment schedules to which he spoke of, were due to the county auditors on March 1st. Just to give you a snapshot on what we're dealing with. Under the AB 26 definition of enforceable obligations, those ROPS were submitted. In LA County, if those ROPS are submitted on a 6-month basis, on March 1st, the first 6 months of this year, the ROPS totaled of the 71 redevelopment agencies within Los Angeles County, $1.5 billion. Annualized, that's $3 billion of ROPS based on the criteria in AB 26X. Total tax increment revenue for those same 71 redevelopment agencies in the full annualized final year was $1.3 billion. So we believe that this bill is going in the wrong direction as it relates to the definition of enforceable obligation. We think that AB 26 clearly provides for sufficient parameters on what is a valid enforceable obligation. We would like to work with the working group and the committee and all the other stakeholders on narrowing that provision as the bill goes forward. There are a list of other concerns that we have. Those are primarily the two biggest concerns. I will end on this. There is discussion, and some have said that, well, the oversight boards are still in control. That the language says that these expanded loans that council spoke of shall be considered, but ultimately it's up to the oversight boards to determine. That's true. However, I would also like to point out that it's important not to forget that in AB 26X, the law bestows the highest level of a relationship on the oversight board members. That is, they create a fiduciary relationship from the oversight boards to the holders of enforceable obligations. So our concern is that because the statute requires the consideration, it's conceivable that county council, or not county council, council advising these oversight boards will be probably forced into a position to require that those are approved given the statute. So Those are our principal concerns. We want to continue working with the Speaker's office, the working group going forward. We thought it was helpful for the committee to get a better understanding of the numbers as they're actually coming in. Those same 71 redevelopment agencies in LA County, as required under 26, have reported standing debt of $22.7 billion. So moving in a direction that expands the definition of an enforceable obligation, we think detracts, and that it's better to let the process of AB 26X to play out prior to changing the law at this time. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Any other opposition? Any tweeners? Very good. We'll move to questions from the committee. Do we have any questions? Mr. Norby?
The last two speakers I found very persuasive, Mr. Chair, and they echo a lot of the concerns that I have regarding trying to expand the idea of enforceable obligations. This money doesn't come out of thin air. It's transferred from one agency to another, as redevelopment agencies have for the last 60 years. And the counties are oftentimes the service provider of last resort. They govern those areas that cities don't want because there's not a lot of sales tax. They're in charge of health and welfare. They administer a lot of programs, state and federal, for which they have inadequate money. And when they come forward, two of the biggest counties in the state, Santa Clara and Los Angeles, and explain the impacts of the bill on their budget, then I think we really have to listen to this and agree with them that the bill, while it is trying to clean up a lot of loose ends as a result of the dissolution of the agencies, really is going in the wrong direction and is taking away money from those agencies that need it the most. I know in the case of Santa Clara County, the San Jose Redevelopment Agency alone, not the city of San Jose, but their redevelopment agency alone, gets more revenue than the entire county government of Santa Clara until Prop 26 and 27 came along. And the counties just can't be sustained with those kinds of losses, which led to the dissolution of the agencies themselves, that and because of the need to backfill the schools. So I appreciate you indulging with them. I know they went on a while, but they had a lot of information. I find it persuasive. I can understand the low-income housing advocates wanting to support the bill because it does guarantee them some funding. But the counties have a profound, persuasive case, and it'll persuade me not to support the bill.
Mr. Hueso. Yes, we are. We already have a motion and a second, so if there are questions, comments. Yes, sir.
I can move the bill. Okay. The reason I'm supporting this bill is there was a time when the legislature made laws and the judiciary interpreted them, and it was very clear that the intent of the judiciary, in the legislature, in approving the bill package that we approved last year, was to keep redevelopment going, and that's not the decision that came through the courts. We're now trying to clean up kind of that in this process, and I support that. It's a very complicated process, as a lot of these redevelopment agencies have redevelopment law written into their land use plans, into their facilities financing plans, into their affordable housing replacement plans, it's a very complex set of documents that you can't unwind in a month. It's unreasonable, and the process that's set forward is not clear. I think this policy that we're bringing forward brings some clarity to that process, and it's a fair process. I worked in redevelopment for 5 years. I got to know it well, and I know that it's a very intricate process. It's very complicated, and the contracts that have been set aside often require subsequent implementing agreements to execute. You can't do that if you don't really have a system put in place that provides the adequate checks and balances to ensure that the initial intent of a contract is seen through its completion. And you can't do that in a month. You can't set up a process that accomplishes that in 1 month. And I just want to thank the Speaker and the working group for putting in the tough hours on this. This is a very complicated area of public policy, and I think you've done a great job putting together a bill that accomplishes the legislative intent of the original governor's bill on this matter. So this is a fair bill. I think where regardless where you stand on the subject of redevelopment, this is a fair policy that's being put forth to wind down a behemoth. I mean, the redevelopment is enormous in this state, and it's set up in so many different ways and different boards and different approaches. There are a lot of thinking out of the box on how to implement redevelopment over the years. And like I said before, I'll say it again, you can't wind it down in a month fairly and ensure that the right decisions are made and the proper scrutiny is provided into overseeing how we wind this process down. And I think it's going to be the best way to do it, ensure that everybody is made whole, the taxpayers, the California state and their budget, the local agencies, and everyone that invested in these underserved communities over the course of so many years.
Thank you, Mr. Oh, sorry, Mr. Alejo, then Mr. Davis.
First of all, I just wanted to also just thank the Speaker and you, Assembly Member Atkins, and the rest of the task force, because you did, most people know, you put in a lot of hours, met with a lot of stakeholders, put out a call to a lot of local jurisdictions to submit their input and their thoughts and challenges that they're confronting with the end result of redevelopment. And I think there's no question that there's been a lot of unintended consequences and a lot of unforeseen challenges. And I'm actually persuaded by the many arguments that I've heard from many of the redevelopment agencies in my area and other parts of across California that this bill is desperately needed. And there's some critical timelines coming up that is prompting us to make a decision very quickly and have this bill move forward. And certainly I know you're willing to work with the counties that express concerns as well and continue to work with them. But I think there's also a greater task before us, and it's up ahead, and it's what, how do our communities in the future find opportunities to properly fund affordable housing in our communities in future years. We're able to keep the money that local communities had with this bill. They're able to put that to good use, but what comes next, including a lot of the high poverty areas, high unemployment areas, also need that local tool for economic development. So there's still that concern, that need, and certainly coming from local government, we know how those tools have helped our communities prosper and bring job growth. And so I think that's a commitment that we're still wanting to work with you and our Assembly leadership and the Speaker to hopefully find those long-term answers to those questions that many of our local jurisdictions have come to us with. And certainly would love to be added as a co-author as this bill moves forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And author, I'd like to say that I think this is an outstanding offer to contribute to our cities and local governments who have certainly had some adverse impacts as a result of the original dissolving of RDAs. And I certainly like the concept personally, and if you have an opportunity to open it up again, I would love to join as a co-author on that bill, and I certainly support it 100%.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Campos.
First of all, thank you, Ms. Atkins, for your leadership on this. I know it wasn't an easy task, but you heard members from the Assembly that this was important to us, not on a personal note, but for who we represent in the constituency and the cities that we represent. I am thankful that we were able to keep the housing component pretty whole. I think that was another issue that was very important, and it was stated earlier that the City of San Jose has one of the bigger redevelopments in the state of California. And when I first got on the council, one of the goals was to build, we had a high goal of building affordable housing units within a short period of time, and we were able to reach that before I left. and that wouldn't have been obtainable if we hadn't had the housing component and the redevelopment. And so it's reassuring that we're going to be able to move forward with that component for cities that continue to want to provide housing and units that are affordable to our, I don't even want to say middle class, but our working community. So with that, I am supporting the motion and look forward to continuing to see you move forward in addressing some of the issues that were addressed today. Thank you, and I'd like to be added as well.
Thank you. Let me again also add my thanks to you and the task force and to the Speaker for the work on this bill. I'm going to support this today. I do hope that you'll continue to work with the County of Santa Clara and the County of Los Angeles to see whether there are some things that we can do to perhaps provide greater perfection to this. But I love what you've done so far, and we'll be voting for it.
All right. Mr. Knight?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not going to vote for this. I think that taking away redevelopment was one of the worst things we ever did, and now we're trying to make a big piece of garbage a little bit better. So all I want is a commitment that when this changes or any iterations, that it can come back to local government.
Very good. Ms. Atkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to assure you that we have continued to try and work with all stakeholders, those in support and opposition in every way possible, because as has been stated by a number of your members on the committee, it has not been a simple thing to look at the prospect of unwinding a program that's been in place for well close to 50 years. So we know that the intent of the legislature, by vote of the legislature, was to have AB X27. So we have tried to do as less harm as we can to those jurisdictions having to implement AB X26. We think this is not a fundamental change to the unwinding of X26, but that it is as reasonable as we can do to make it orderly. And frankly, we know that we are not pleasing almost anyone, frankly, 100% across the board. So we'll continue to work with not only Los Angeles County, Santa Clara, but others who've come forward. We think we can work on some of the issues that they've raised today as we move forward and do other technical changes. And I will just end with an incredible thank you to your committee consultant, who added amendments that would do things like further transparency and accountability, issues I know that are of concern to you as a committee. So I want to thank her, and I certainly have to thank the staff, because while the working group took a lot of hours, it really was Mr. Rabowski, Mark Eibel, Diane Griffiths, and certainly Katie and other members of the Speaker's office that helped us really get all those comments, because we got them in writing. And so I would ask for your support. Let you know as we move forward, we'll be taking the amendments, including people who want to be co-authors, in a timely fashion. And I would just ask for your aye vote, and thank you for your comments.
Very good. We do have a motion and a second to send the bill to appropriations, I believe. Go ahead and please call the roll.
Motion is due pass to appropriations. Smythe.
Aye.
Smythe, aye. Alejo. Aye. Alejo, aye. Bradford. Aye. Bradford, aye. Campos. Campos, aye. Davis.
Aye.
Davis, aye. Gordon.
Aye.
Gordon, aye. Hueso. Hueso.
Aye.
Hueso, aye. Knight. Knight not voting. Norby.
No.
Norby, no. The bill is out.
All right, that measure is out. So off to appropriations. Mr. Monning. We will be taking up AB 1614. And Mr. Monning, if you want to wait a moment and let everybody filter out so you can. And committee, Mr. Monning has requested and received permission to have a photographer in the committee room as well. All right, very good. We will take up again item number 6. Mr. Monning, AB 1614.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Thank you. I'm here to present Assembly Bill 1614, which extends the statutory sunset date of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, known as FORA, from June 30th, 2014 to June 30th, 2024. FORA is the regional governance entity that was established in state statute in 1994 at the time of the Fort Ord base closure. This regional governing body has had oversight of munitions and building removal, the development of the CSUMB campus, habitat conservation, and a host of other duties. I've recently amended the bill to require that the FORA board submit and approve a transition plan 18 months before inoperability of FORA to the Monterey County Local Agency Formation Commission, and have also submitted other technical changes. With AB 1614, it is my intent to focus on issues directly related to extending FORA's sunset date, and ask that any additional issues, including but not limited to land use decisions, updating the base reuse plan, reducing FORA's appeal fee, and changing the governance structure, be considered at the local level first. Should FORA not be extended, its function will have to be performed by other local agencies that are not equipped to fulfill the ongoing and fixed-term obligations on the former Fort Ord, such as the completion of ordnance and munitions removal, implementation of the Habitat Conservation Plan, financing of contaminated building deconstruction and removal, and coordinating the planning and construction of the Central Coast Veterans Cemetery, to name a few of the issues. Simply put, there remains a need for a regional authority to oversee the reuse of the former Fort Ord military base. I respectfully ask that you vote in favor of extending the FORA sunset date, and Mr. Chair would like to present 2 witnesses in support, and then there will be some other add-ons.
Very good.
Thank you. I'd like to present County Board of Supervisor, Chair of the FORA Authority, Mr. Dave Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Monning. Mr. Chair, committee members, I am Dave Potter. I'm Chair of the Monterey County Board of Supervisors and Chair of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. I've been with the Reuse Authority since it was established in 1994. I'm one of only 2 remaining members that actually were a part of the vision that was created for the reuse of Fort Ord. Fort Ord was the largest base closure in the United States, approximately 28,000 acres. It had a civilian and military population of about 37,000 people. When that base was closed, we promised this community we would replace the $1 billion that was part of our economy. The disillusionment of Fort Ord, of the FORA board, and the associated confusion that would probably occur would derail the implementation of that vision. I just want to take a moment to outline the complex makeup of FORA for you. It involves 13 voting members and 12 ex officio members. That's a total of representatives from the U.S. Congress, the State Senate, the State Assembly, the U.S. Army, Transportation Agency, 4 academic institutions, and 1 water district. The Assemblyman has done a very good job of outlining those jobs that will not be completed, but the worst part of it is that we will not see the replacement of the jobs that were originally anticipated to be replaced. Fort Ord was part of a very long visioning process. There was originally a group that thought a federal prison would be a good idea. Another group thought an amusement park might be appropriate. But through a community process and ultimately the settlement of a lawsuit with the Sierra Club, we came up with a plan that has at the core academic and research and education. We were the 1998 recipients of an APA National Award for the most outstanding reuse plan in the United States. It is my hope that we can continue to implement that plan. AB 1614 gives us that opportunity. Thank the Assemblyman for his leadership on this, and I thank you for your consideration today. I'm available to answer any questions, along with Michael Hulamard, the Executive Director.
Thank you. And our next witness in support will be J.P. Tremblay from the California Department of Veteran Affairs. Mr. Potter did introduce with us Michael Hulamard, who I also want to acknowledge, Executive Director of FORA, who's here to answer any technical questions the committee might have. And I want to thank Mr. Tremblay as well for joining us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Point of clarification, we officially do not have a position on this legislation at this point. We are working with the member's office. We have worked with him very closely over the past couple of years on this process for the development of a veteran cemetery at the Fort Ord site. The cemetery would maintain and continue that long history of Fort Ord and Monterey with the military and with the veterans of the state of California. We have worked very closely with FORA throughout this process. We've had 4 bills that have gone through specifically dealing with the veteran cemetery. FORA has been one of the leaders in the process and the development of the veteran cemetery, the state veteran cemetery, and have been a very good partner in terms of working with them and providing any technical expertise or work that we need relative to the development of that project. So their role is very important. This has been a long process. I've personally been working with them for 6 years on this process. The extension of the sunset does make some sense in terms of continuing the work that FORA has been doing on this cemetery.
Good afternoon, Dana Nickel with Pete Conatee and Associates. On behalf of our clients, American Veterans, American Legion, California Association of County Veteran Service Officers, and the Vietnam Veterans of America, we strongly support AB 1614, which seeks an extension of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Efforts to realize the development of a veteran cemetery at Fort Ord have been underway for more than 17 years. If FORA is allowed to sunset, all of our efforts will have been in vain. The idea of putting our local veterans who have worked so hard to see the cemetery built through that kind of emotional roller coaster is unconscionable. We ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Opposition or support? All right. In support, if we just name association, be great.
Mike Wellborn with Friends of Fort Ord Open Space Solutions. We're in support, if amended, to address the issues the author is not willing to put in, but we think it's such a mess that we appeal to the legislature to help us get these issues taken care of, the finances, the transparency, and the land use issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other in support?
My name's Ralph Alar. I'm a Korean and Vietnam veteran. I'm in support of this, representing the Monterey County United Veterans Council and also several Monterey County local veterans associations. We are full support of this extension of the FORA organization.
Thank you. Any other in support? Well, opposition?
We're in support if amended.
Come on up, please. Yep, come on up.
Introduce yourself.
Yep.
Honorable members, thank you for allowing us time to speak. My name is Bruce Delgado, representing the city of Marina, which is the largest landholder of any city on the former Fort Ord. If you were to fly over our city, you would be dismayed to see literally miles of rubble left over from the base. This is a prime example of something you probably all would like to be redeveloped with redevelopment monies. This is the kind of thing that dismays many people when the redevelopment agencies were dissolved. However, the past 15 years of this process have not well prioritized the removal of blight. Instead, it was thought 15 years ago everything could be done. The economy was going to boom such that all undeveloped space meant for development and all previously blighted space could all be redeveloped. 15 years fast forward today, we in Marina are left with thousands of acres of fenced off land that's dividing our city in pieces. We have 40% low or very low income households. We are definitely the most economically disadvantaged city on the peninsula. And we have more than our fair share given FORA $65 million of our real estate values, where everyone else combined has given far less. And so my letter last week to you, which is in your packet, was as an individual, But last night, our city council produced a letter you all have in front of you today, which is pretty much the same as my letter last Friday. So we are in support, if amended in some important ways, and we need you to give at least some strong encouragement text in this new bill so that in the next 15 years, we prioritize the redevelopment of blight rather than putting large projects on oak, woodland, and open spaces, which will directly compete with our need to get rid of our rubble and our blight, which I think is everyone's interest. Secondly, there are several voting members that have no skin in the game. They have no land on Fort Ord. They pay nothing, whereas our city has paid $65 million. Those voting members that have no land on Fort Ord and only pay a very small membership fee, of which we pay 2 membership fees. But those land jurisdictions that have no land and pay next to nothing except for a paltry membership fee, if it's so much in their interest, what goes on, that they want to tell the landholders what to do, then they need to pony up, they need to contribute financially so that it's a fair playing field financially. There are other members, such as the educational facilities, that spend nearly $300 million a year on Fort Ord and own collectively approximately 2,000 acres who do not have a vote. And so in our letters to you, we suggest that this legislation, which created the governance structure, is the appropriate vehicle to amend the governance structure. And that would be adding an educational vote for CSU Monterey Bay, UC California, and the Monterey Peninsula College. Maybe they get 1 vote between them as an educational representative. Also, there's no public member at large on this board, and there's a large contingent of our public that either is not favorable to what's going on with the Fort Ord Reuse Authority or wishes things to improve to stay as good as it can be. So it would be great to have a public member represented. Finally, in our letters regarding the finances, we want to be logical and fair that the financial distribution of expenses is not borne upon the least able to provide those. And we don't have any problem with the $100 million grant that Seaside and other jurisdictions have. We're thankful for the $45 million in grants that FORA has been able to acquire for Marina's benefit, but our pickle is that we have translated $65 million of our land assets to be spent on Fort Ord, and because we are the leader in redeveloping and being successful in redeveloping, but we have such a long way to go that we do not want the next 15 years to continue to siphon our real estate values into dollars for FORA to spend elsewhere, especially on open space projects when we're so desperate to get our city back together since the base closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, opposition. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy White. I'm the Executive Director of Landwatch Monterey County. We're a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to smart growth in Monterey County. Landwatch submitted a letter on Friday that's included in your agenda packet. Thank you for Katie for working with us on getting that included. Landwatch opposes AB 1614 unless amended. There's some amendments that we would like added, and our letter outlines that. Additionally, the Sierra Club's letter and the League of Women Voters letter also outlines the same conditions or amendments. Furthermore, the community is deeply concerned about FORA's lack of transparency, which actually resulted in a lawsuit that was filed after AB 1614 was written, and that lawsuit was essentially a public records lawsuit trying to force FORA to provide financial documents on how they spend their money and where they spend their money. So Landwatch hopes you postpone 1614 or a no vote until FORA responds to the public records lawsuit or that the bill is amended. The amendments that we would like to see is an update of the Fort Ord reuse plan by 2014. Currently, the plan is 15 years old and woefully inadequate. Phasing of land uses and infrastructure to address urban blight first. The mayor of Marina very aptly gave some examples of how phasing of land use would make more sense to address the blight first. And elimination of appeal fees. Currently, appeal fees are in excess of $5,000. Landwatch recently appealed a project to the FORA board, and it cost us $5,042. That really precludes public participation. Luckily, Landwatch has that kind of money, but the public does not, and that is not fair. Finally, the updated FORA plan needs to have better enforcement. Currently, there's not a lot of enforcement mechanism for the Fort Ord Base Reuse Plan. So in conclusion, because these amendments are not concluded, we really urge your no vote on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness in opposition.
Good afternoon. My name is Paula Pillow. I submitted a letter to you. I'm not going to go over every single item in there, but what I want to express very plainly is, with all due respect to the sponsor of the bill, is that the other issues that we're raising are in fact relevant to the sunset date, because if you ignore the issues of the enforcement of the base reuse plan, the imbalance in FORA's governance, the lack of fiscal responsibility and accountability, the inability of its planning and implementation to even approach what it should have, the 80% prior to this date, the distribution of tax increment funds, its status as a quasi-redevelopment agency, and its failure to live up to its memorandum of agreement with the U.S. Army to convey property as a no-cost development, economic development conveyance. You are basically supporting those things. That's why it is relevant to the extension. So we do support what the prior speakers have said, and we ask that you not extend this sunset date to 2014 without the 7 conditions that we have placed in our letter to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a member of the public, resident of Seaside, and I just came to...
Could you just state your name for the record?
Jason Campbell, sorry.
Thank you.
And I oppose this bill in the form that it's in. I would like to see some of these amendments put in. I noticed in the packet that you have 14 individual letters opposed to this bill, but only 4 individual letters supporting it. I think that gives you an idea of how the public feels about it, not necessarily the government agencies. And I suppose on some level I represent those people. The FORA has not been revised or updated from what I know as it's supposed to have been, and they started on these plans in 1991. I was trying to think of how old I was back in 1991. They're not current. The public and what the public will is and what economic realities are just need to be responded to. At a minimum, as I said, the amendments like proposed by Landwatch and some of these other people should be added. I am also concerned that FORA, if continued as it is, may act like a de facto redevelopment agency. Thank you.
Thank you. Any tweeners? All right. We do have some tweeners coming up.
Thank you. My name is Lane Marceau. I'm president of Shea Homes, and we're one of the more significant developers down there in the Fort Ord Base, primarily in the city of Marina. The project's called the Dunes at Monterey Bay. FORA is set up to ultimately have a lot of obligations to take care of down on the overall base. Their revenue that they have available to them is portions of the land sales that come. The land sales proceeds comes to FORA. They have, over the next 10 years, if this gets extended, they have at least $150 million of tax increment that would be coming to FORA. And then, if needed, there could be developer fees. There is a developer fee that is being paid by the developers on the base that we believe is too high, and for reasons that both the tax increment and the land proceeds are not used in their calculation to determine the developer fee at this time. And what we would like to see is an AB 1600 nexus approach to establishing fees. That's the reason why we have that law in place. Today they have a CFD financing mechanism that establishes a $46,000 per house fee on the base, which there is no correlation to that fee to the obligations that they have on the overall base. And we'd just like to have a fair process that establishes a fee, if any is needed, and we think an AB 1600 nexus approach would be the right way to do that. So that is our concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to questions from the committee, Mr. Monty, if you want to respond to some of the comments.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think I can do it pretty briefly, and I do want to welcome questions or comments from committee members, and also Mr. Hulemard would be, I know, equipped to respond to some of those. All of the issues that have been raised by opponents have been the subject of ongoing discussions, dialogue groups in the district. FORA has been involved in those, Sierra Club, Land Watch, League of Women Voters, other stakeholders. There was reference to a lawsuit that was recently filed. There's no disposition. That case is pending in the courts. A slight clarification, Sierra Club has provided unconditional support for this extension, and they've also raised some ongoing questions. We're fully committed to dealing those. We think they're best dealt with stakeholders in the district. I'm not averse to addressing some of the issues as they percolate at the local level and involve local stakeholder input. At this point, I believe the case has been made for the extension of the sunset to allow with the ongoing obligations, implementation, and ultimately protection of the community with respect to the ordnance munitions removal. Thank you.
Mr. Alejo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to, first of all, really thank my good colleague and friend, Bill Monning, for taking a great leadership on this role. And certainly want to also welcome our elected leaders who came, Marina Mayor Bruce Delgado and longtime Monterey County Supervisor Dave Potter for being here as well, and all our local residents who care about this issue enough to come up here and provide their perspectives. But certainly, this bill is, I think, an example of how legislation should get done. It has bipartisan support. And I know, and for me, it's a very simple bill, just simply extending it 10 years, the life of FORA. But Bill has been very open to meeting with all the other issues. I know a lot of folks want to bring in other issues, other concerns that they have. That's not part of this bill. It's simply that 10-year extension, but yet the author has committed to continue working with all the different stakeholders on this issue. This issue of Fort Ord, I'm right next door. My assembly district certainly was a severe economic blow, not only to the peninsula in Monterey, but the entire region. My father was stationed when he was served in the U.S. Army at Fort Ord, and it was a huge generator of jobs and economic growth in our county. And when it closed in '91, certainly our local elected leaders, including Leon Panetta at the time, were trying to find what comes next for the Fort Ord and all the properties there. And unfortunately, we're able to get a new university campus that is vibrant, that is growing. And certainly, but as we all know, there's ongoing needs there. The munitions cleanup, contamination sites, places that we could put to good use for affordable housing and job growth. Some of that has happened, but there's a lot of potential there. But certainly, I think FORA is a needed mechanism to carry out those goals as well. And I know somebody mentioned other issue that was just expressed regarding the nexus for fees. Again, another issue that the author and FORA staff are willing to work on with the people, all the folks who have expressed issues on that as well, among many issues. But I certainly see this as critical, and the FORA has never been an issue of just the cities that are nearest. It's always been looked at, and that's why there's folks from different cities. I think almost every city has come out in strong support of this bill because it was intended to have a regional economic benefit, not just for those closest to the base, but for the places like Salinas Valley and Watsonville and Castroville, all these areas that would really benefit if we're able to bring the jobs that this base could provide for our local economy. So I'm in strong support of this bill here today.
Yeah, I have just a very simple question. I know this has been ongoing since 1994. Here we are in 2012. What percentage are we completed? I know there's 75% open space, so we're talking about 25% of the base.
Of the 8,000 acres or so that would have development activities, approximately 23%. That's what we'd estimate. It's higher than that if you look at projects that are entitled. It's much lower than that if you look at how much is constructed.
Okay, so about 1.5% a year?
something like that. I think there clearly what we did not know in 1994, the scale of munitions contamination. We did not know the $300 million plus in cost for removing buildings. It's probably $60-70 million on CSUMB alone. We didn't know that there would be 2 more rounds of base closure that would affect DoD funding. We had no idea what the impact of 9/11 was going to be on that kind of funding, and we also didn't know that we were going to have the significant recession that we had in the last decade. We put all those together, and 1.5% is probably more than we would have been able to do otherwise.
Okay, so extending from 2014 to 2024 is another 10 years. Where do we see at the end of those 10 years? Are we going to be 80% done? Are we going to complete the mission?
Well, if assuming we're not going to have a recession like we had the last 7 years.
I can guarantee right now we're going to have another recession at some point. I mean, you have to put those things into consideration.
So, but assuming it's not of the scale and impact of the one that we've had the last 6 or 7 years, we're probably going to be in the range of 50 to 60% through our base reuse plan at that time.
Okay. And my last question is, at that point we're going to be at 30 years. Mm-hmm. We're going to be 60% done. I'll even give you 70%. Where do we go from there? Or is that the goal?
I think that the private sector will be fully equipped to handle things by that time. In the next 10 years, we're talking about completing the dangerous removal of contaminants like munitions and explosives, completing much of the building removal and the blight that you've heard from folks we need to get done early. There's still $60, $70, $80 million just within the confines of the cantonment area on the former Fort Ord. It also will be that the restoration of valuable habitat will be done by that time as well, and the completion of our habitat conservation plan. Some of the key things that are regional cross-boundary effects will be completed by 2024.
And the cemetery. Thank you.
Not to forget the cemetery.
Mr. Norby.
What's partly at stake here is the credibility of sunsets. They have to have meaning. If they don't have meaning, then they're irrelevant. My son stayed up almost till midnight last night. I was constantly on the phone with him completing a project that the teacher said had to be due in today. Now, if extending a sunset is pretty simple, tell that to his teacher. If he knew he could have had it extended, obviously he would have waited till the last minute for the second week. This project is only 23% completed, yet it's had 20 years. They're asking for another 10, and I'm sure they'll be back in 10 years and ask for another 10. So the sunset really has no meaning here, and since it has no meaning, there's really no urgency. I had a few general questions that maybe the author could respond to, and the one thing is my biggest disconnect, that here is a prime piece of land right in the middle of the Central Coast, and we're acting like it has to go on welfare, like it's a huge public liability rather than something that could be sold and developed into something very, very valuable, and that value could then pay for the needed developments. We have land in Orange County, former El Toro base, the former base at Tustin. It didn't have a very complicated reuse authority that continually wanted to be extended. Those parts that were saleable were sold off. That profit from that paid for the improvements. But of course, they didn't ask for 75% open space. There is open space at the El Toro Marine Base. That's going to be coming into a park, which has had issues, but nothing compared to this. So when you go in saying, okay, we're going to keep 75% of it open, I mean, the 25% is going to have a hard time paying for improving the 100%. And if the residents there want that kind of open space, I understand that. But there's going to have to be a mechanism for paying it rather than continuing the tax increment. This is $150 million in tax increment that will go to this project. It's not going to go to the schools that will have to educate the students that live in these homes, or the firefighters will have to do that. So there's just a disconnect here, and maybe you could respond to it. I thought we were going to get you remember the the end of the Cold War was going to have some kind of a bonus, what was it called, a peace dividend, because these bases would be shut down and they'd be returned to the private sector and be put into something productive rather than for a military installation that was no longer needed because of the demise of the Soviet Union. It was a long time ago for some of us, wasn't it? And it just seems instead of a peace dividend, we've got all these properties that need more and more public subsidies just to be developed. So those are my concerns, Mr. Chair.
If I could just respond quickly, Mr. Norby, and I think in your analysis and in your question, you described a mechanism where this valuable real estate in the Central Coast should be the envy of private development, private investment, etc. And I think if you look at the mechanisms designed to convert this base, the funding mechanism is very much determinant on local communities that abut the former base, and development projects consistent with a base reuse plan do provide the funding mechanism for the removal of blight, for the protection of open space, for the development of a habitat conservation plan. The problem is described by Mr. Hulemard. We've been slammed in a down economy where investors have backed away, where the obligations to continue with ordinance removal, habitat preservation plan have continued. This has also not just been a green light. There's been litigation along the way. There's an enforceable legal settlement with the Sierra Club that defines certain provisions for protection of that open space. If you look at it through the lens of how many acres are being preserved for open space, for recreation, once safe, once cleared and safe, it's going to be an incredible resource for the entire region, including the attraction of tourists to the existing established economic infrastructure. Hospitality tourism is our #2 employer in the Monterey Peninsula, and protecting this open space for tourism is going to drive that economic engine. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. I would suggest that the sunset is not arbitrary. In fact, we've put an amendment in this legislation for a mechanism for a transition plan to be developed for the transition through LAFCO to the dissembling of the FORA authority. But it has to be done in a manner that's informed by the progress made, and I would return again to the safety of the public. This was a military base. There's unexploded ordnance on this base, and there's no local jurisdiction that has the resources, the skill, or the commitment to go in there and finish that job. So anyway, I don't know if Mr. Hulemard, you've been generous with your time, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just ask if Mr. Hulemard wants to add to that, and then defer to you, of course.
I'd just like to ask you real quick. I mean, what happens if we say no, and if the sunset isn't? I mean, just what happens then if this doesn't go through?
Okay, I think that's an important way to look at it, and that's how I've talked with stakeholders. Watch out what you wish for if you oppose this, because if you dissolve FORA, if we let this sunset run, it's going to devolve to the authority of current footprints of that land with local jurisdictions who are strapped under this economy, communities of Marina, Seaside, Delray Oaks. They do not have the resources, nor does the county, to complete the mission of ordinance removal, of coordinating on a regional basis the development of a veteran cemetery designed not to serve any one community, but the communities from San Luis Obispo to Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, San Benito, Monterey County. That's why we need a regional authority, because it is a regional resource. The devolution to local control, it'll be law of the jungle. We'll create chaos.
Any other questions? I think we'll take that as your close, Mr. Montague.
Thank you. Heard your aye vote.
Very good. Thank you. We do have a motion in a second, I believe. Yes. All right, let's go ahead and call the roll then.
The motion is do pass. Smythe?
Aye.
Smythe, aye. Alejo? Alejo, aye. Bradford? Aye. Bradford, aye. Campos? Aye. Campos, aye. Davis? Gordon? Aye. Gordon, aye. Hueso? Aye. Hueso, aye. Knight? No. Knight, no. Norby?
That measures out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. I appreciate the time you afforded to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Olson. Give everyone a moment to clear out. Very good. Yes, let's go ahead and take up item number, I don't know, Assembly Bill, I don't know what item it is, 1592, though.
That glorious
Bill 1592. Item number 4.
Flashbacks to my city council days.
Correct. Item number 4, which does have, we do have support on both sides on this measure.
Yes, thank you. I'll be short and sweet. First, I'd like to thank the committee staff for working with us on the amendments to this bill, just to tighten the language. Appreciate that. AP 1592 would allow local jurisdictions the option of waiving building or inspection permit fees for disabled veteran homeowners to make ADA modifications to their homes. By waiving these fees, they will be able to cope with their service-related injuries and transition to a civilian life more quickly, and it will also save them money. Again, this is just an option tool that gives local governments the discretion to support their disabled veterans. Thank you, and requestfully respect your aye vote.
Very good. Witnesses in support?
I, Cindy Hillary, on behalf of the 31 rural counties in California. We're the co-sponsor with Mono County of this bill, and we just urge your aye vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Irene Ortega with the California State Association of Counties, also in support.
Thank you.
Dana Nickel, Pete Conatine and Associates, AMVETS, American Legion, California Association of County Veteran Service Officers, California State Commanders Veterans Council, and Vietnam Veterans of American Support. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Opposition? Let's go ahead and call the roll.
The motion is due pass to Veterans Affairs. Smythe.
Aye.
Smythe, aye. Halejo. Bradford. Campos. Campos, aye. Davis. Davis, aye. Gordon. Gordon, aye. Hueso. Hueso, aye. Knight. Knight, aye. Norby.
Very good. We'll see you in Veterans Affairs. Thank you. I believe Ms. Butler. Trying. Ms. Butler, this is item number 8, AB 1700.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. I'm here for AB 1700, which would provide an exclusion from a property tax reassessment when a change in ownership occurs where two individuals who owned a principal residence together as joint tenants or tenants in common, and the property transferred from one co-tenant to the other upon the death of a co-tenant, with a survivor co-tenant obtaining sole ownership of the property. The bill will also address any number of situations where two people own a principal place of residence and one person dies, leaving their interest in the property to the other. For example, seniors, veterans, or others who own a home together and choose not to marry, persons with familial relationships like brothers and sisters, and friends or companions. A person and his or her care provider might live together, unregistered domestic partners, or any two people who live together to share the cost of housing would qualify. AB 1700 is narrowly crafted. The exclusion is limited to two people who own a home for a minimum of 1 year as their principal place of residence, and only applies if one of the co-owners passes away and full ownership is granted to the survivor via trust or will. These criteria are not arbitrary, rather they ensure fairness in the application of property assessment.
Move for approval.
Second.
AB 17 is a small but significant step to protect many Californians from losing their homes when their co-tenant passes away, whether that co-tenant was a brother or sister, a friend, or any one of a number of scenarios could exist. So I respectfully ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Alice Kessler, representing Equality California. We're the bill's sponsor. I'll be very brief. Just thank Assemblymember Butler for carrying the bill, and we think this is a basic fairness measure that will ensure that those who've owned a home together and cared for one another won't face potentially devastating property tax increases upon the death of one of the co-owners. So urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. My next witness.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, and thank you, Assemblymember Butler, for carrying this bill. My name's Deb Kinney. I have an estate planning practice here in Northern California, so I get to see what the practical application of a bill like this would be. Right now, AB 1700 would, as Assemblymember explained, provide that exemption upon death for one of the co-owners. And in my practice, we have a lot of elderly people who have chosen not to or can't get married for a myriad of reasons. Many of them grew up many years ago when it was during the McCarthy era. They're older now, and they're the ones facing this. Other people have chosen not to get married or registered because of the conflict of federal tax and state tax, and their Social Security benefits may be diminished. But while we have all of these different stati and other people who have lived together or co-owned a house together, we'd like to protect them from reassessment at death. So I think I'd ask if there are any questions. No? I'm happy to go on, but...
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Alan LaFaso on behalf of Board of Equalization member Betty Yee. Also thanks to the author and urge your support of the bill. Thank you.
Very good. Any other witnesses in support? Any opposition? Let's go to questions from the committee. Okay, we do have a motion already. Motion and a second. Ms. Butler? Oh. Okay. I'm sorry. That's all right.
Motion is due pass to Revenue and Taxation.
Hold on, real quick. Would you like to close? You any further closing comments?
Respect to ask for your vote.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Motion is due pass to Revenue and Taxation Committee. Smythe?
No.
Smythe, no. Alejo? Aye. Alejo, aye. Bradford? Campos? Campos, aye. Davis?
Aye.
Davis, aye. Gordon?
Aye.
Gordon, aye. Hueso?
Aye.
Hueso, aye. Knight?
No.
Knight, no. Norby?
Bradford.
Bradford?
Aye.
Bradford, aye.
All right. That measure is out. Off to Rev and Tax.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Mr. Gatto. Item number 2, AB 1549.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of us have conversations regularly with developers and small business people, and a consistent refrain that I get, I'm not sure about you, when you talk with them, is you need to make the permitting process easier in the state. They go into permitting offices and they can't even get a list of the permits they need at once. They have to deal with multiple people, multiple jurisdictions, and that's very frustrating because often they don't know how long the process is going to take. There's no certainty to the process, and that contributes to the cost. This bill is simple. It would solve that by creating a one point of contact rule for multi-jurisdictional permits within the state. Somebody who could tell them, hey, you're applying for a fast food franchise permit. You need to get this local permit from the cities, this from the county, and this from CARB. Respectfully ask your aye vote for this bicameral, bipartisan, wonderful effort.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Fort.
Yes, good afternoon. Yolanda Benson, representing the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce, also on behalf of Pat Fong Kushida, president of the chamber, who was unable to be here today. We are in support of this bill for a lot of reasons. Obviously, collaboration is important, but it's important to know that the state is working with the local jurisdictions and that everybody's on the same page to get something done. Often the permitting process is what actually thwarts any kind of business even coming to California because the permitting process is so cumbersome. And whether it's at OPR or however GoEd gets involved, what matters is that there's collaboration, that everybody's coming together to try and get projects done and permits done.
Very good. Any other witnesses of support? Opposition? Tweeners? Very good. We do have a motion and a second. Let's call the roll.
The motion is due pass to Natural Resources. Smythe?
Aye.
Smythe, aye. Alejo? Alejo, aye. Bradford? Aye. Bradford, aye. Campos? Aye. Campos, aye. Davis?
Aye.
Davis, aye. Gordon?
Aye.
Gordon, aye. Hueso?
Aye.
Hueso, aye. Knight?
Aye.
Knight, aye. Norby?
That measures out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gatto. Last item, item number 7. 1676 from Vice Chair Alejo.
It's
It's Zach, Dad. That's my cowboy hat in my office.
I know, I see.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members. The state controller audits conducted in 2005 and 2009 indicated that San Benito County underfunded ERAF for the fiscal years between 93 and 2001. But in 2004, a state law was signed with the intent to forgive county property tax allocation errors for any state auditor controllers audits conducted between that same period, between 93 and 2001. This bill, AB 1676, deems correct the apportionment factors used by San Benito County to allocate property tax revenues to ERAF for the fiscal years between 93 and 2001. And there's precedent for the kind of legislation I'm presenting here today. In the past, several other counties, including the counties of Riverside, Pluma, Santa Clara, Santa Barbara, have all successfully attained legislative relief on similar disputes with the State Controller's Office. It is time to resolve the long dispute between San Benito County and the State Controller's Office and get San Benito County in a path to economic recovery. We are only asking for what is fair and what has been granted to other counties in similar situations in the past. I respectfully ask for your aye vote here today. And with me from my district are San Benito County Sheriff Darren Thompson, County Supervisor Margie Barrios, and Rich Inman. County CAO Rich Inman will be testifying about the importance of this bill for San Benito County.
Very good. First witness.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for hearing my brief testimony today. I took office as sheriff about 14 months ago, and at that time had a budget of $10.9 million and 82 employees. Here we are 14 months later. My budget's now only $9 million, and I have only 58 employees. To make matters worse, this month we're trying to close a $1.3 million gap in the sheriff's office. I know that's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but let me tell you a frame of reference. That's equivalent to 13 bodies, and currently in our patrol division we only have 14 bodies. So we're coming out of a crisis and headed into one that's much worse. We are uniquely located between the Monterey Bay area and the San Francisco Bay area along the Highway 101 corridor, adjacent to Highway 5 with the primary artery of Highway 156. That means the 7 million people that live within 2 hours of us have an influence on our community, both positive and negative. This is compounded further by the fact that law enforcement staffings from the surrounding areas are much higher than our staffings. And to use a brief analogy, the other agencies have more sheepdogs than we have, and so the wolves can trot into our jurisdiction less opposed. Given our current situation right now, we're only able to put 3.5 deputies on the field at the time to cover an area of 1,400 square miles. We're in the process of confirming this, but we believe already we have the lowest deputy per citizen ratio of any county in California. Our response time to priority calls right now is 9 minutes and 51 seconds. These response times are going to go down, of course. They're going to go up. They'll be increasing, and as those increase with the upcoming layoffs, so will the impact to our community. Our most frequent priority one call is domestic violence, followed by in-progress gang crimes. I thank you for your consideration today, and we hope that you would have an aye vote for 1676. Thank you.
Thank you. And this measure does have support on both sides. So please, next witness.
Also, I forgot to introduce our San Benito County Clerk, Auditor, and Recorder, 3-in-1, Joe Paul Gonzalez, with us as well.
No Brown Act violations, though. We're all right. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and members of the committee. As Auditor Controller of the county, I think Assemblyman Alejo has really defined the problem that we're encountering and the correction that we're trying to we're pursuing under AB 1676. So I'm really here to answer any questions, any technical questions that you may have. And I would ask that you urge that you support the bill and urge an aye vote on the bill. Also, I'd like to thank the Assemblyman and his very diligent staff and all their work they've done on this bill.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman and members of the committee, and thank you, Assemblyman Alejo, for helping us through this. My name is Margie Barrios. I'm one of 5 supervisors in San Benito County. I'm here representing them. Our community for the last 4 years has suffered extremely high unemployment and foreclosures, higher average than the state of California. This bill will help put San Benito County in the right path to recovery, so I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Chair, members of the committee, my name is Rich Inman. I'm the County Administrative Officer for San Benito County, and I urge your support for the legislation. Thank you.
Very good. Any other witnesses in support?
Mr. Chair and members, Matt Cyberling on behalf of the State Association of County Auditors. Strong support. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses on the bill? Very good. Any questions from the committee? Is there a motion? Is there
Move the bill.
Is there a motion on the bill?
Move it.
Do you have a motion?
Second. Look at what the Republicans.
Thank you. Hey, thank you. I was looking at my colleague. What's up? Thank you. Good Lord. Good bipartisan effort here.
That's right.
You guys are going to get it.
We need to restore some professionalism back to this committee. Very good. Mr. Alejo, would you like to close?
No, I just ask for your support of this bill. Just so you know, San Benito County is always ranked on the top 20 of the counties that are most economically distressed in the entire country. This bill would go a long way to help the county during the most difficult of times. I ask for your support here today.
Very good. We do have a motion in a second. Let's go ahead and call the roll.
The motion is due pass to appropriations. Smythe.
Aye.
Smythe, aye. Alejo.
Aye.
Alejo, aye. Bradford.
Aye.
Bradford, aye. Campos. Campos, aye. Davis.
Aye.
Davis, aye. Gordon. Hueso. Hueso, aye. Knight. Knight, aye. Norby. Norby, aye.
Very good.
Thank you.
Your
Thank
measure's
Unanimous.
out.
Beautiful.
Measure's out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, before we move to adding on, I mentioned before that it was you can. I mentioned before briefly that today was the last hearing for Katie, our chief consultant. So before we break, we don't have cake, but we do have a resolution that we wanted to give Katie. Thank her for her service. She likes the green of the People's House in the Assembly, and that's why she's moving over to the speakers. We do have a reception for her at Red Rabbit this afternoon. So if you guys, so if any of the members would like to show up, come by. We'd love to have you guys there as well. Yeah, it's on J, 28th and J. The airport. Sounds good to me too. So, Katie, thank you again. And so, before everyone broke, we want to just again thank you for all your work and everything you've done for us. So,
Thank you.
Hey.
And so, if we could, if you all could, anyone that needs to add on, and then I want to thank our witnesses for our informational hearing for hanging on. And if you want to move on, matriculate up to the dais, and we'll have all of our panelists at once. But if there are anyone that needs to add on,
Yeah, and
okay, real quick too.
I just want to say thank our staff, Katie. The highest level of professionalism, and I really want to thank you. You're moving on to bigger and better things, but we'll still be working very closely. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll do the.
Hi, Mark. I'm Linda.
Hi, Linda.
I am Mark. Oh, he gave it to me.
Oh. I was trying to remember because we have John Decker now.
I didn't take him. Oh.
This is for our informational hearing. So if you want to come add on. Because everything's out, we just have to add on.
I did hear that.
pretend like I'm not here. We'll be here later.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then consent. And then consent. Okay, thank you. Oh, let's see. Consent first.
Yes. That was Norma Torres.
Where was Les Lombardo?
How are you doing?
Les Lombardo.
You know, at least we're all sitting up here together. At least you're not one at a time.
Oh, remember. Ask you about, I think they're only
How is Deborah doing? She's great. I'm glad that Mark got a job.
Which is fantastic because obviously really challenging to have coastal relationship. And so she's thrilled to have him, and he's thrilled to be back too. So that's terrific. And it's just been an election year, so she's been out and about quite a bit.
All right, local government is officially adjourned. And now we will move to our informational hearing on developments in the use of joint powers agreements and joint powers authorities.